Hello, and welcome back to the Mental Health How To video series. I continue to be Sarah Johnson, and I continue to be very glad that you're here. Let's get to today's topic. What is mental health? So let's start there. What are we even talking about with mental health? Well, mental health is how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Let me say that again. How we think, how we feel, and how we act. It's kind of what we're doing all the time as humans, right? We all have mental health. And the good news is there's many things we can do to make our mental health better and worse. So we're going to talk about hopefully ways to help make it better in this series. So if we think about mental health as how we think, feel, and act, the kind of fun thing is that means that's just kind of how we are, which means that when we ask someone, how are you? We're inviting a conversation about mental health. That is, if we mean it. Lots of times in our day, we say to each other, hi, how are you? I'm fine, good, better, sleepy, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean anything. In fact, sometimes when we say, I'm fine, I would argue that it's actually a bit of a cover up often, that maybe we're not actually fine. Definitely fine is not an emotion. It doesn't really give us any good information. So, what I am challenging you and inviting you to consider is more often asking, how are you in a genuine way, and answering honestly. What that can look like is actually identifying the emotions that you're feeling and adding coping skills. So, I want to give you an example of what that might sound like or look like. So, we'll pretend that somebody's asking me, Sarah, how are you? And I will say, oh, good question. Let me think about that. How am I? Um, haven't checked in with myself in a while. How am I? I am less tired than I have been the last couple of days because I was real tired last week from some big projects that I was working on, and I've been focusing on rest, which has been good. I feel better. I am a little distracted though. I have a lot of projects going on, so that's why I'm also focusing on trying to be very intentional about doing one thing at a time. And I'm excited to be here with you. Yeah. If this were an actual conversation, I would then say to the other person, and how are you? And we would have that conversation. I'm hoping you noticed that I expressed some emotions there. So some distractibility, some excitement. I also noted that this was kind of a bonus that I have some physical sensations going on. And I mentioned what I'm doing to cope with that, focusing on rest, focusing on grounding myself and trying to do one thing at a time. This is what I'm encouraging you to do in your day-to-day life. More often, ask how are you and mean it. And so there's lots of ways you can ask that question. And ask about coping too. What are you doing to cope? Who are you leaning on? How are you handling things? Maybe who else are you talking to about this? Tips for having that conversation with somebody else. Really working to be present. So maybe putting the phone away so that you can actively listen. Know that maybe they'll say they're not doing great. Maybe that's not what you wanted to hear, but if you're honestly asking that question, thank them for giving you the honest answer because that can help us help each other. Show that you're paying attention. There's lots of different ways to do that. For some people, it's eye contact. For other people, it's not. It's leaning in for some people. It's maybe saying, and oh, and responding. Kind of figure out in your relationship how you can show that you're actually paying attention. And always, of course, we want to avoid interrupting other people so that we can really hear what they have to say. We also want to thank them for sharing and let them know that, if things aren't great, well, that's okay. That's normal. Let's center on hope and help and figure out how might we help you get through this. You might want to ask their permission to share your own experiences, and just, let them know like, hey, I've been through something similar. This is who I leaned on, and this is how I got through that. Now's the time I get to invite you to practice this. So after this recording, I'm going to invite you, or maybe you want to pause it and do it right now, invite you to actually practice asking someone, how are you, in that really genuine way, spending some time listening to them. And when they ask you, to also practice answering honestly. Use those emotion words and those coping skills. What are you doing to take care of yourself? So I want to give you one more thing thinking about mental health, another way to think about mental health in 3D. Sometimes when people think about mental health, they think about it only as going from one direction of there's mental illness or no mental illness, when in reality, there's actually two axes that we're looking at. So high mental wellness to low mental wellness. And let me explain what I mean by that. Each of us could be in any of these four quadrants. In any room we go into, there may be somebody in any one of these four quadrants. On the upper left, we're looking at somebody who has high mental wellness and a mental illness that's diagnosed or that could be diagnosed. They have symptoms that meet the criteria of it. Going down below that line, we have an individual with low mental wellness who also has a diagnosis. Up in the right-hand upper corner, we have an individual with high mental wellness and no diagnosed mental illness. And then down below, we have an individual with low mental wellness and no diagnosed or diagnosable mental illness. Now, we may move from different quadrants, different parts in our life. I'll give myself as an example of the bottom lower right quadrant, an individual with low mental wellness and no diagnosable mental illness. At the time when my mom died several years ago, of course, I loved her. She was my person. So that gave me low mental wellness for a period of time while I was grieving, right? So that's not a diagnosable mental illness. It's actually a really normal, natural part of being a human. Yet my wellness was lower at that time. So you can see how we may move around in those different quadrants. So I want to give you one last bit of things to think about. One of the reasons that we're talking about coping skills when we're asking people, how are you, is because it helps you understand if they're aware of and if they're using coping skills. So that's important. It also helps you learn to know if they have other people that they're talking to. So are there other people that they're leaning on? We want people to have a variety of supports. It helps you show that you care about that person because you're asking those deeper questions. It can also take pressure off of you as the informal support. You don't have to fix the situation, right? That's not yours to fix. You know they're using some coping skills, or you know that we can help them learn some coping skills. Great. You don't have to fix that problem for them. It's also an opportunity for you to show and kind of teach and coach that coping skills are there and it's a helpful thing to do, to use when you're having trouble. So, as always, I want to remind you to ask for help when you need it. There are lots of resources that you can click both on through this slide deck. There's 24-hour resources like 988 and 741-741. And as always, I'll invite you to reflect on something you'll take away from today's conversation, your next steps, and who you can lean on or get support from as you go through this journey. Oh, there's my other cat, Gene. He's a banana. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please take care of you, and I'll see you back for our next video.